Hello there, this is Adam Shaw, I'm the Heart Guy. Now today I'm going to talk about key moments that change your life. Now as a nurse, all sorts of weird and wacky things used to happen to me, but no more so than when I was in Australia in Sydney once. I was working in a rehabilitation ward with people who'd broken their hips, they'd had things happen to them, they'd had to be slowly rehabilitated back. And I kept going back to the same ward. And each night I used to go in and say hello to all of the patients. And one of the patients was a woman, a lovely old lady called Dorothy, who'd fallen over and broken her hip three and a half months ago. And it had taken her that long to be able to get out of bed and use her frame to get to the toilet. And one day they said to Dorothy, right, you're okay to go home now. And it was handed over to me, Dorothy will be going home tonight. So that night I went round all of the other patients first so I could spend some more time with Dorothy. And I went into the ward. I sat down with Dorothy and I said to her, hello Dorothy, you must be delighted. Now Dorothy had always smiled to me, she was always in good form. But this day, her face just dropped. And she said, delighted? What have I got to be delighted about? She said, my daughter's just had a baby. I couldn't possibly go and impose on her. I'm going to be dependent on people to get me everything for the rest of my life. She said, I'm just a nuisance. I'm just going to be in the way. I can barely get from my bed to my chair on my own. I need help with washing. I need help with just about everything. What have I possibly got to look forward to? And why would I be delighted? And I thought, wow, I hadn't been prepared for that. Hadn't been ready for it. By sheer coincidence, I just started reading a book that I'd found, and it was called The Tibetan Book of Living and Dying by Sogyal Rinpoche. And what he'd said in the first few chapters, which is all that I'd read there, is that the main difference between the East and the West in their cultures and philosophies is in the East we prepare for death from the moment we're born. In the West we don't prepare until death, until it's here. And then it becomes frightening and overwhelming. And my experience of working with people at the end of their lives indicated that this was the case. So I sat down with Dorothy and I thought, okay, I need to do something different here. And I just asked her the question. I said, Dorothy, do you believe in life after death? And she looked at me and she said, I'd like to, but I just don't know. I said, well Dorothy, there's all sorts of things around this. That the Dalai Lama is completely, the whole Buddhist community believes he's a reincarnation and he's the 14th Dalai Lama. I believe he's the 14th. I'm not quite sure on the numbers, but the fact is, when the Dalai Lama dies, he gets reincarnated, and all the Buddhists believe that this is the case. If you've watched 7 Years in Tibet, you'll understand. And I said, most religions believe in some sort of life after death. They completely agree with it. And we had this long conversation based on beliefs around living and dying and what happens once you die. And to cut a long story short, at the end of the conversation, Dorothy, she grabbed my arm and she said, Adam, thank you. This is probably the best conversation I've ever had in my life. And I thought, oh, that's nice. So I smiled, I left the room. The next morning I looked in, she was still asleep, so I went home. Now the next night I came back to the hospital expecting that Dorothy would be gone home. I got into the hospital, I went to the lift doors open onto the ward, and as they opened, there was the crash team, the resuscitation team running past with their resuscitation trolley, up to where Dorothy had been, to her room. And as I walked down the corridor, I looked in and Dorothy was there flat on the floor with everybody dumbstruck because Dorothy had no medical history. There was nothing medically wrong with Dorothy at all. And there she was lying dead on the floor in front of me. And she'd probably dropped dead the moment I'd entered the hospital. And I remember standing there looking into that room thinking, have I just killed Dorothy? And I knew in my heart that she was in that room and she'd waited to that point to teach me a lesson. So one day you will get to consider the question that will be the most important thing to you. Is this it? Is this life all that there is left? Or is there something else? Now, I'm not going to tell you that I know 100% that there's something beyond this life. I can't tell you that, and I wouldn't even dream of attempting to convince you that that's the case. But one thing I can guarantee is that it definitely helps to believe that. So that's my little serious blog for the day, and that will give you some food for thought. On behalf of me, Adam Shaw, hoping that you enjoy the rest of your day and indeed the rest of your life.